I am in Padua, 50 kilometers inland from Venice, in the wealthy hinterland of the Venetian Republic known as the Veneto. Venice has always been the dominant city of the region, but the most significant garden was made here, in Padua. The Orto Botanico, made in 1543 as part of Padua University, is thought to be the world's oldest botanical garden. Initially, it was set up to study and collect simples, which is the description that was then given to medicinal plants. The original garden lies behind this beautiful circular wall. But when it was first laid out, the wall wasn't there. And people very quickly cottoned on to the fact that these plants that they were laying in the beds were potentially enormously valuable. They were medicinal plants. So if a cure could be found, somebody was going to get very rich indeed. So people came in and then nicked them and flogged them at great profit. So they put up the wall. So what you've got to see is actually it's a fortress. And the purpose of the wall is to keep people out. At the same time that art and architecture were being transformed in Renaissance Florence, scientists were laying the foundations of modern botany in Padua. The Orto Botanico was dedicated to studying the properties of newly introduced as well as indigenous plants so that they could be used safely and effectively. Now this was revolutionary, because up to that point, plant-based remedies had largely relied on superstition and folklore. Most medicine was based on the doctrine of signatures, which basically meant that if a plant looked like an aspect of the human body, then it would cure it. So, for example, a walnut. It looks like a brain, so it was used to try and cure diseases of the brain, or pulmonaria, lungwort that we grow, was used for lung diseases. And in practice, that killed as many people as it cured. And the whole point of the Renaissance was to explore and discover and apply the mind to science. So by 1533, when the chair of botany was set up here in Padua, they wanted to collect as many plants as possible, not just say it looks as though it will do this, but to find out. The head of the Orto Botanico, Professor Francesco Bonafede, realized that the first step towards understanding medicinal plants was to identify and classify each specimen accurately. You know, it's really strange because this is fundamentally a filing system. It's a laboratory, and there's no attempt to make a beautiful garden. The important thing is the order and the sequence and the display of plants so they can be studied. And yet, there's a magic here, there's a real charm. You walk in and you're seduced, it feels wonderful. It's the most beautiful garden. And I know I'm biased, of course I'm bound to love it, but I defy anybody not to feel that magic. As new plants came in, they were given a specific position in an elaborate network of borders. To learn how it works, I met the former prefect, Professor Elsa Cappelletti.
This book was the first exercise book for students. It was a pocket book in which there was the plan of the garden.
So this is the kind of the garden here.
With the 4 squares.
Yes.
In the past, students had to identify plants only observing their shape, the flowers, and so. And then they had to write the correct name of the plants they identified. Perhaps there was a belladonna, and they had to write belladonna.
So if they knew which bed the plant was in, then they would know which plant it was.
Yes, yes.
So the pattern was, if you like, an aid to memory as much as anything else.
Yes, yes.
It may be a simple system compared to our electronic wizardry, but actually it's beautifully effective, because you can see how if a student who had studied here came across a plant in the field, perhaps on the other side of the world, weren't quite sure what it was, but they vaguely remembered it. All they had to do was think back to where they had seen it in this garden, which particular bed. And because each bed only had one plant, they'd hone in on that, look up in their book, bed number 36, block number 2, bingo, they've got the name. The 16th century saw an increasing flow of new arrivals. The very first foreign plant introduced into the garden was in 1561 and was the agave from Mexico, where it was prized by the Mayans for its wound-healing properties. The oldest surviving plant in the garden is the Mediterranean fan palm, Chimerops humilis. This is the original specimen that has been growing here since 1585. It's hard to exaggerate the importance of this garden. There were other botanic gardens around the same time. The one in Pisa was just about the same period. But this was where the study of plants really took on importance. And that appreciation of plants, first of all as an aid to medicine, and then as an end in itself, was slowly but inexorably shaping the way that we viewed our gardens. As well as studying medical plants, the Botanical Garden in Padua played an important role in testing out the cultivation of newly introduced agricultural species that were to prove essential to feed the growing population.